So welcome back everybody. We are out in our processing room, and on today's video I'm going to show you how I make my pickling recipe. This is fantastic for pickled okra or regular pickles, but we're going to try something new today. We're going to try pickled green beans. It's something Tiffany's been after me to do, so let's test it out today. But save this recipe if you like pickled okra or pickles, and it may very well work for the green beans as well. All right, so this recipe I'm going to give you here is something I come up with years ago. It'll make about 10 pints, assuming you fully pack your jars or whatever your vegetable you're going to be pickling. And trust the process, it gives it such a wonderful taste. I get compliments on this all the time whenever I share this with people. So to make roughly 10 pints, you're going to start out with 1 cup of apple cider vinegar. This is where I typically lose people, but it gives it the perfect amount of bite. Because we're canning quite a bit today, I'm going to go ahead and put 2 cups in here to make sure that we have plenty of liquid, because we have quite a few pint jars out there being sterilized. All right, so in a stock pot, because we're going to want to warm this up to dissolve everything, again, I'm going to go with 2 cups of apple cider vinegar for this particular recipe. Actually still a little left over, so we'll go ahead and put it in. Now we're going to move on to white vinegar. Typically I'd do 3 cups of white vinegar, but because we're doubling this recipe up today, I'm going to go to 6 cups. All right, there's 6 cups, and I suggest you always make a little extra just so you can make for sure you have plenty to cover what you need. So whatever amount of vinegar that you add, for example, if we were going to do 10 pints, that's 1 cup of apple cider, 3 cups of vinegar, so 4 cups total. You want to do the same amount in water. Now we did 8 cups in here because I'm doubling my recipe, so I'm going to do 8 cups of water in here as well. All right, so for my standard recipe, I do 2.5 tablespoons of canning salt or pickling salt, and this is to do 10. Again, we're doubling everything today. All right, and there is 5 total for the double recipe. Next, we're going to add 1.5 tablespoons of sugar, and I can assure you this doesn't make them sweet. I'm not a big fan of like sweet pickles and all. Now I'm going to double it to 3. I'm going to put this over some heat and bring it to a slight simmer while I'm mixing in, because we want to dissolve all the salts and sugars, and then this is ready, nice and hot, to pack in our jars. Now I've got all of our jars and rings and lids washed, and we're out there sanitizing them. We're going to bring the water to a rolling boil. This is very important. You want to make sure everything is sanitary, nice and clean, and boiled if you can before you put it in the jars. This keeps botulism and other things away from you. And I want to caution y'all, probably one of the best books out there is the Ball Canning book. It's like the Holy Grail. Get that book. What I'm doing today, we're close to sea level down here in Florida, but your times will vary based on your altitude. You need to get a book like that to verify it. For example, today we're going to water bath can for 10 minutes, but depending on your altitude, you may have to go as high as 15 minutes. This is something you need to make for sure that you figure out so you don't wind up getting sick or worse. Botulism is a real thing. All right, I'm going to go warm this liquid up, stir it in. Again, as soon as it comes to a slight boil, we're good. Everything's nice and dissolved. And as soon as our cans, jars, and lids have boiled out there in that water, we're ready to pull them out and then start packing everything in. And I'm going to show you how this all goes together. All right, so we're starting to come to a boil here. As soon as I get a rolling boil, I know that all my lids and jars are sanitized. I'm about to go ahead and put my lids in. I don't typically leave them in there for the full time because they have a nice protective seal on them, and I don't like to overboil those seals, but I do want to sanitize the lids. So I'm about to drop those in, and then we're going to pull everything out. I like to leave my burner on low so my water does not cool down on me, and then we can get it back to a rolling boil quickly whenever we stick our jars in here. Okay, so my jars are nice and hot straight out of the boiling water. Tiffany is over at the house warming up that solution that we just made, our pickling brine, so to speak. Another reason I like to get it nice and hot is so we're putting hot liquids in hot jars back in boiling water. If you use a very cold liquid and put jars in boiling water, sometimes that can actually shock them, bust the jars, and that can cause all your ingredients to just go out everywhere into your canner, not what you want. So I like to keep everything nice and hot, move and work quickly, and I've yet to really have any issues with shattering. I think out of all the years I've been canning, I've had 1 jar shatter, but it is eventually going to happen. So now that we have all of our jars laid out, it's time to put our ingredients in. And I like to put, like say, my garlic and dillweed and dilled seed in before we'll put pickles, okra, or in today's case, our beans into the jars. Now don't skimp on this. This is key, whole dill seed. I know you hear a lot about dill weed. We're gonna use that today as well, but dill seed is a key ingredient and I really think makes this taste so good. So into every jar that I have here, I like to put a half of a tablespoon of dill seed. By the way, if you're having trouble finding this at your local supermarket, I picked mine up on Amazon. All right, now that all of our jars are filled, we're gonna move on to the dill weed. Now for the dill weed, I like to put a half of a teaspoon, a smaller amount in here. We're also gonna put some fresh dill in here that we got out of our garden. I don't really think you can overdo it with the dill. So believe it or not, dill actually freezes very well. We grew some dill plants this past fall, and Tiffany cut some of the stems and actual little leaves themselves off. You can wrap it up, freeze it. Now you can just pinch some off and it tastes wonderful, still smells wonderful. We use it all the time for tartar sauces and other things. So I'm gonna put a pinch of this in every one of the jars as well. Again, I don't think you can go wrong with too much dill. It's the name of the game. Because we like a little extra kick, I like to put 1 to 2 chilies in every single jar. This turns out making a wonderful flavor and doesn't really make anything spicy. Trust me on that. And the nice thing about these chilies, whenever I'm done, I will vacuum seal this bag and these last forever whenever you vacuum seal them. So just drop 1 down in each jar, you'll be good to go. And if they're on the smaller side, put 2. And lastly, minced garlic goes wonderful in dill pickles or dill anything. So a good half a teaspoon to a half of a tablespoon. You really can't go wrong with this stuff either. It's wonderful. Now try not to get this on the lid because we don't want to cause any sealing issues with the lids themselves, so we don't want to get it on the rim up here. Let me show you what it looks like in there when we're all done. The aroma is already wonderful. Garlic, some what we're calling fresh dill, regular dill, dill seed, and a chili pepper. So now you can see we have a large jar of beans. Now they're going to come in all different lengths. These are not going to fit in the jars. Probably best to use even bigger jars than this. But what I'm going to do is just snap these in half and get me a good handful so we can pack them down in there, and then we'll snap some shorter ones up top. I really don't care about the length, to be perfectly honest with you. Just as long as they fit in the jar okay. So now we'll go ahead and put a handful of these down into the jar. I want to put them in a handful at a time because if you loosely throw them in there, they're just going to kind of stack up like this and you're not going to get as many in the jar. So now, I'll hold the jar off to the side, make sure none are sticking up above the rim. We don't want any sealing issues. And we'll just start packing more in there. If you went through all this trouble, get as many in as you possibly can. All right, well, that couldn't have worked out any better. We cleaned 16 jars and lids, and that huge bowl right there wound up filling up exactly 16 jars and lids.
That was the exact amount.
We didn't even throw a single piece away. That couldn't have worked out any better. It's hard to believe that huge bowl wound up packed right there. You can put a lot in jars when you really take your time to pack stuff in there. Now we're very close to the rim, but not all the way up top. We don't want to be touching it. And you're going to see whenever we're about to fill this with that liquid that we warmed up to dissolve, we're going to stop somewhere about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch down. That's called a head space. What happens as this boils, we're going to go out and put it back in the boiling water for 10 minutes. Stuff's going to soften up and settle down. That boiling water also makes sure everything's nice and sanitary and safe, kills off any bacteria. And these lids that we're going to put on here are actually going to seal back down as these cool down. It creates a vacuum when everything's cooling down in here, and it'll pull tight. So everything's been boiled, no air is allowed to enter, thus no bacteria. And as it cools down, it creates a vacuum seal on the lid, and these are nice and shelf stable for 1 to 2 years. All right, so here's our pickling brine that you've seen that I mixed up. And in a little canning kit, we have this funnel that's going to allow us to put fluid right down in there. I'm just going to take a ladle. This can get a little messy. Put everything down into the jar, and again, we're wanting to make for sure But we don't overfill these. We want to leave about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of head space up top. And we can always top them back off. So now what we need to do, since we've put so much stuff in here, we need to wipe the rims down of these jars because there is no doubt we have stuff on those. We want to make sure that we get a really good seal. So make sure these are nice and clean, then we'll place our lids on. Now we'll take our lids. If you're not familiar with those, there is that kind of rubberized seal that'll pull down. We'll place these right on top. Now we'll take our rings. We'll put these on what I like to call finger tight. So just barely tighten this down. The ring is really only there to keep the lid nice and centered, but we don't want to go too tight because there's going to be escaping air during the bowling process. And then again, as these cool down, the lid will seal and you can actually remove the ring at that point. Do not over tighten. All right, so I've left the water out here at a simmer. If you've boiled off too much water, you may have to add a little. We want to make sure it completely covers the tops of the jars. So I'm gonna go and run the flame up right now. This should start coming back to a rolling boil, and we're gonna set all our jars in. As soon as they touch the bottom and we get the last one in, I'm setting a timer for 10 minutes. Again, that's gonna vary based on your area and your elevation, but that's what works for us down here. Then after 10 minutes, we're gonna kill the heat, remove them, set them on the counter, and wait to hear that wonderful pop sound, which means the jars have sealed. All right, now I'm going to gently place these in the bottom. And if you have a deep canner like this, you can stack one on top of the other. If you have a shallow canner, you can only do one level at a time. Now that these jars are packed really well, you may find that you have too much water in here. That's okay. You can just ladle some out. All right, now that we have them all in, we're gonna wait till we come back to a rolling boil, and then we start our timer for the 10 minutes, but wait until you see a boil before you start your timer. All right, it's been almost 10 minutes, so I just killed the heat. We're gonna pull these out. Now there's a couple ways you can look at this. You can do what's called refrigerator pickles, where you don't hot bath them or water bath them. That's probably gonna make your crispiest pickle or crispiest bean, crispiest okra, etc. Now we're used to water bath canning because we like to store these on the shelf for a long period of time, and you do lose some crispiness when you do that because they've been in boiling water. So keep that in mind. There's ways that you can play around with this as well. But if you want that long-term storage, you need either a water bath can or pressure can if we're talking different types of things. All right, so we'll just start pulling these out, setting them on the counter, and I'll explain what will happen with that process. All right, so now we're gonna let these cool on the counter right here, and here's what you're looking for. Right now, all the lids are in the up position, but as these cool off, that will suck down. You'll start hearing them pop. So I'm gonna leave them in here for an hour or two, and that's typically all it takes, but you can go a few hours. And then you're gonna come back and start pressing down the lids and checking. And if any of them springy or pops back at you, it is not sealed. And after a few hours, those need to go in the refrigerator. Something was wrong with the sealing process. Now those are still good up to a couple of weeks as long as you keep them refrigerated. Anything else that the lid stays down when you press on it that is permanently sealed, you can either leave the ring on or remove it so it doesn't rust, and you can put those on the counter and store for a very long time. Did you just hear one pop? They're already pulling in. There goes another one. So hopefully you can tell by the light, that one's out, that one just pulled in. So typically I wait 1 to 2 weeks before trying these. That'll give you the most flavor in there. Trust me, the longer you let them sit, the better they taste. But Tiffany and I are eager to try some of these. We're probably gonna let a can sit overnight, maybe in the refrigerator, because I want these nice and chilled. And we may try them tomorrow or the next day, include that on this video since I don't have to get this out for a couple of days. That would be the earliest I would try, but keep in mind, the longer they sit, the better they will taste for you. All right, y'all, so here it is a couple of days later. Like I said in the video, I recommend you wait about 2 weeks. That's gonna give you your most flavor. But what we're most curious about is how crispy they are. Sometimes when you water bath can, things can become soggy. But again, we do that so it's shelf stable for such a long period of time.
I'm excited to try.
Yes. So here you are, you can see Maybe you can see I got it kind of dark in there. Should have kicked on some more lights, but everything is nice and mixed up, so we should be getting all those flavors, but I don't expect the bean to have full flavor inside just yet. I'm mainly curious about that crispiness. All right, so let's see. So you can see what they look like, covered in garlic and all the other spices, so let's see.
Maybe they can hear that crunch. That's awesome.
I bet y'all can. That's actually much crispier than I was expecting.
We meant to buy pickle crisp, and that was one ingredient we didn't get at the store, but hey, it turned out perfect.
No, these are plenty crunchy. I'm so happy with that. Sometimes whenever I do cucumbers to make pickles, they can be a little bit soggy, but they still turn out so good. I love the way they taste. Even the same with okra. Okra is not mushy though. Whenever I do the okra, it's still got enough bite, but this is by far the crispiest thing I have made with that recipe.
Very pleased with this recipe. And it actually already has pretty good flavor.
It does, but it's only gonna get better.
Yep.
All right, y'all, that's something new we were trying this year. My brother-in-law is actually the one that told me about pickled green beans and how much he loved them. Y'all, pickled asparagus. My mom's been buying that. So good. Pickled green beans, good. Pickled okra. You don't have to just do cucumbers for pickles. There's so many different things you can pickle out of the garden that is so good. So I think for sure next year we'll grow some extra beans and continue to pickle some of these along with okra and other things. Tastes great. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.